Good evening. I'd like to go ahead and call the November 30th regular board meeting of Everett Public Schools Board of Directors to call to order. Closed captioning is being provided by Zoom solely for the convenience of our viewers. Zoom closed captioning may not always transcribe accurately due to limitations of the machine-generated service. Everett Public Schools does not review for accuracy and makes no representations or warranties regarding the accuracy, reliability, timeliness, or completeness of any information that appears in a closed caption. And tonight I have the honor to read our land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that we are on the traditional lands of the Coast Salish, Snohomish, and Tulalip peoples. We express our deepest respect and gratitude to the ancestors of this land, on whose shoulders we stand. In Everett Public Schools, we strive to create equitable outcomes and build a culture of inclusive belonging for all students, teachers, staff, and community. May you please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance with us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the secretary please call the roll?
President Mason.
Present.
Vice President Lassine.
Present.
Director Nichols.
Present.
Director Mitchell.
Present.
Director Berg.
Present.
Student Representative Pilch-Basson. Present. Student Representative Colley.
Thank you. Our first order of business is the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Salzman, may you please provide an overview of tonight's agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and the public. Good evening. A segment for tonight's agenda contains a segment for recognitions, the superintendent's report, a segment for board comments, a segment for public comments, a segment for routine business, a segment for information discussion, a segment for new business, and upcoming agenda items. Since publishing the agenda, the following changes was made to the agenda. Item 7.01, the superintendent's report, the presentation was added. Item 10.02, approval of the personnel report, the report was updated. Item 12.02, fourth quarter financial update, the presentation was updated. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Hearing or seeing none, we will go ahead and move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say no. The agenda is adopted, which takes us to recognition. And tonight we have a special recognition, which I believe Kathy Reeves is going to introduce.
Yes, thank you. Tonight we would like to recognize Jackson High School Counselor Paul Turner. So Paul, if you could come up front, please. Before 2021, ninth grade students could take college and the high school classes, but they were not allowed to get college credit for it, while upperclassmen taking the same class could get college credit. Mr. Turner shared the idea of making college credit available for freshmen with Director Berg, who facilitated the House bill. It received unanimous approval in the House and the Senate, and on April 16th, 2021, the governor signed into law House Bill 1302. Now ninth graders are allowed to receive college and the high school credit, and we would like to acknowledge Paul Turner for sharing the idea and Director Berg for facilitating the House bill. And I believe Director Berg would like to say a few words.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Mr. Turner, for coming out tonight. And I just was really excited when the idea, well, I have to tell the folks at home as well, Mr. Turner is my kid's teacher or counselor. And when my daughter was in ninth grade, she was taking a class that would have given her college credit. And Mr. Turner shared with me, no, she can't get college credit despite sitting in the classroom with her peers taking the same course. The reason was it was a state law. And like many parents, I scoffed at him and I said, said, there's no way there's a state law that stops this from happening. And he said the magic words to me, which I think any policymaker, when they hear it, they know what to do. He said, well, wouldn't it be great if we could change that law? It would help a lot of kids. And so from that moment on, I did what most tenacious parents do, which is call OSPI, called Everett Community College, and then realized that, yes, he was right. It was a state law. And when I was elected to the legislature, the very first thing that I pledged to do and that I did was write a bill to fix this wrong. And it was because of Mr. Turner and his advocacy for our kids. So thank you so much. I thank you. The many students that testified on the bill, thank you, because we did have an outpouring from across the state of students, not just asking for this to be done, but acknowledging that their peers and their siblings were not receiving credit. So I just thank you. And I have the signing pen that the governor signed with the bill for you to have for your collection.
Thank you.
I'm going to take your picture, Paul. So let's have her hand that to you again for 10. There you go. Great, thank you very much.
I was going to give you the opportunity to say a few words if you'd like. Oh. Okay, good. Well, you did good, so thank you. We appreciate it. Okay, that takes us to item 7.0, which is our superintendent's report. Dr. Salzman.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and the public. First of all, congratulations again to Paul Turner. And every time I go to Jackson High School, I went to Lauderhill, Paul Turner Elementary, K through 5. So I always think of Paul Turner. So Paul, good to see you again. I just want to compliment our entire teaching staff and administrators for our instructional review process and our board that also sat beside me during these. We are down to our final week of instructional reviews already for the first semester, and boy, it's gone fast. Today we had Forest View, outstanding IR, and we have Everett Virtual Academy and Everett High School later this week. So in picture here is Silver Lake, Monroe, and View Ridge, for just to name a few, but outstanding instructional reviews. Teachers, you are amazing, and thank you so much. I'd like to just to mention, as you know, there's been a staffing shortage across our nation, not only just here in the Everett Public Schools. And anybody would like to join and substitute, please contact Chad Golden in the HR department because he's taking calls tomorrow. But since November 1, I want to compliment the entire CRC staff who have been going to schools to substitute, either as a certified staff or classified. Amazing. And it's just the great support to our schools that the CRC has done. So I'd like you all to stand up that's here right now, and to all CRC members, a round of applause. Thank you. Last week, we had the privilege of the Washington State Superintendent of Schools, Chris Rydell, to visit our district. We visited Monroe, Lowell, and Sequoia High School. He appreciates seeing our educators doing great work with our students. I want to thank him for coming out. For many times I said to him, come out and see our kids back in action. He did, and I want to thank him publicly. Well, guess what? It's holiday winter time, and that means concerts. And what a great way to say concerts live again, okay? And if you have not already seen one, there are many more opportunities, but several performances are scheduled at the Civic Auditorium, while many also will be held virtually as well. But please, we'd like to show you now a recent short clip of a recent choir performance at North Middle School.
Here comes the snow, it's falling down, it's falling gently upon the ground. Here comes the snow, it's falling down, it leaves a blanket upon the ground, ground, ground. Snow, 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 peacefully the flecks of water falling down
Amazing students. How about that? Thank you to North Middle, and thank you for sharing that tonight. And then finally, it's the annual next Tuesday story time with Saltzman. So there'll be a live Zoom session to hear a story from me next Tuesday night. And families, please check your website for that Zoom, more Zoom details for that. Literacy is so important, K through 12. And I just want to share, last year we thought many elementary school students loved it, but boy, did the high school students love it, huh, Tara? I got a lot of likes from the high school students, so looking forward to it again. So thank you again, and thank you, board, for this opportunity. Yes, completed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was great. Those are nice jammies, too. Thanks, compliments of Kathy. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to board and student representative comments. Would anyone like to get us started?
Oh, I will.
Whoever goes first gets to talk about the conference we all went to, and then all the rest of us just say, yeah, it was great.
Well,
Dr. Mitchell.
I will just say that I was glad to do the WASDA conference virtually, and it was very nice, just even watch things on Twitter. So thank you all. That's all I'm going to say. And I appreciate the book that Pam gave us. And I did see his I went to his small group thing, and just, if I liked his recommendation, how hard it is for us to find just 1% of our waking hours, which is 9 minutes to take to ourselves. So I am one of the many people that cannot even seem to find 9 minutes for myself. But I did, in the past couple of weeks, I had some time at Emerson Elementary School because I wanted to see the Spanish language program in kindergarten, and it was so much fun that I was taken to 3 different classrooms, very, very diverse students, so not all native Spanish speakers. I saw lots of Anglo and non-Anglo kids, and doing different activities of phonics and writing, and then singing a song. And it was just, I really do believe that I could see little neurons connecting inside of those brains. And one little boy who asked me what a word in Spanish was, and I said, I'm still learning Spanish, but en español, and he goes, I don't know it in Spanish. So it was a lot of fun to be there and to see that program and to support that program, and to know that they are hiring for preference for Spanish, but it's a complement to the non-Spanish teachers, not to compete with the non-Spanish teachers, so that students, the class will continue as the grades go on. There are 3 Spanish classrooms and 3 non-Spanish classrooms, and how does that move forward through the grades? So it's sort of nice to hear a cooperation between the teachers that are Spanish speaking and non-Spanish speaking. The Forest View IR was my second IR and my last IR this year, just because of my schedule, was just fun to be again in another different elementary school and see the great work of a teacher. And I did call this out specifically because we talk about social emotional, but how easy it is. I saw one thing that just seemed so easy for a teacher to do is the students were dancing and singing a song on how to do the letter H. When they had to sit down to actually get their task, the teacher got one of those balls that's all interconnected and it stretches. And she said, okay, everybody deep breath in and out. And then she put it down, and is a transition from that high activity of dancing to that sitting activity. And I just thought that is how kids can learn how to regulate themselves. And so it was wonderful to see. Just on a personal note, we are 22 months now into COVID, and it's booster shots are out there. I know they're very hard to get now because everybody can have access. So please get your booster shot when you can. And for those people that still have not yet been vaccinated, I have a close family member who chose not to be vaccinated and is now in a hospital on oxygen with COVID pneumonia. And middle-aged with comorbidities, our thoughts and prayers are with him. It was due to a contact at work
contact tracing, sort of everybody got tested. His wife tested positive. She got a cough and no taste, which was my symptoms, but her husband is now hospitalized. And it is just sort of, if you can get vaccinated with the evidence that's out there, please start at least your first shot if you can. They are still available, and just a real plea that people get vaccinated. So thank you.
Director Berg, do you have anything to share?
Yes, it's okay. Anyway, so yes, I will echo what Director Mitchell said about the WASDA conference. It was amazing. I was able to do it in person. It's the first in-person conference that I've been able to go to since COVID. And I think the big takeaway for me is how connected we all are as school board directors. Being in WASDA means that we're a part of the largest body of elected officials in our state. And there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of institutional knowledge. And the training they provide is absolutely outstanding. But the thing that really just brought me to tears was just being around colleagues in that space. And it's always been a true north for me as a director, being able to learn and laugh and share. But what I realized that in this moment of COVID, these 22 months, it really was a missing piece. So just very grateful to spend that time with my fellow directors, as well as directors from across the state. That said, it's been an interesting month. I'm so thankful for staff, especially at the CRC, standing up and going into our classrooms. That's not happening everywhere. So just to really point that out. But I also want to recognize our students that are stepping in, and totally putting you on the spot here. But thank you for our student director is actually stepping in our speech and debate club that doesn't have somebody to do that. And so she is, I'm getting an email from who I think is a staff member or parent, and it's really a student who's crazy busy and in leadership and doing these amazing things, but yet taking the time to mentor younger students, making sure they get to their debates on time, making sure we have enough judges for our teams, making sure everything is incredibly organized, like way more organized than an adult, just to tell you. And so I'm just thankful that everybody is stepping in where they can to help us all be a little bit more normal. So it really means a lot to me as a parent. It means a lot to me as a director, and just thank you to everybody in this district for making it happen.
Thank you. Tara, you want to pick up where she left off?
I will say, I think speech and debate has probably gained me a couple of gray hairs this year. But
You're a little young for that. Come on.
yeah, it's a lot, but I tend to be the kind of person who does best when I'm busy, and I think that is the case for some people and not so much for others. But for those of you who might relate to that, it's really nice to have things to be busy with again. At the same time, it's also nice to have a break sometimes. So I wanted to, again, thank the board and Dr. Saltzman for that, the extra day that we got for Thanksgiving. I actually spent that day at work that last Wednesday. I picked up an extra shift, but at least I got to do that. And I just think it was really nice to have that kind of break, because I feel like this year has been very nonstop since it first started. So yeah, just our last push for these last few weeks of the year. But I think that break was what we needed to get there.
Thank you.
I'd like to also mention that at the WASDA conferences, it was great to see so many of our colleagues that are board members throughout the district, and the state, the region. We need professional development, just like teachers and staff. And to sit through different conference briefings and lectures, it's important that we learn how to be better board members to support our students. And this is one of those ways. And to have it in person is really a point of thankfulness and gratitude. It's been over almost 2 years now that we've been going through virtual learning, which is not bad. We can still learn virtually, but to have it in person where you can actually sit and communicate with several of your colleagues over a particular topic and learn from their experiences as well as your own. And it's important that we continue that. And I'm very grateful that we had that opportunity this time. I had also the opportunity to sit in on Eisenhower and Monroe's instructional review. And I can truly say those kids are engaged. It's truly great that we have fine teachers that can bring out the best in children. You can see their excitement and their gratitude for being back in school, and they are learning, and it's a wonder. It's a true wonder, and I'm grateful for that in this time of Thanksgiving. So we just have to make sure, and I'd like to echo too what Director Mitchell mentioned. We don't know what the winter season is going to bring, but we do need to prepare ourselves for that. And I would like to also make a recommendation that parents, get your kids vaccinated, and those parents who haven't been vaccinated, get vaccinated, get your boosters, so that we can continue this in-person learning. It's important for our kids. Thank you.
Director Nichols, would you like to add anything?
I don't have any comments. I think it's all been pretty well covered.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
What she said.
Yes. When you go last and you all went to the same conference, I will say just my big takeaway from the WASDA conference was their focus on kindness and empathy, which is really kind of a departure for a focus for a director conference. And it really spoke to me because what they talked about was these are not things that come just naturally to everyone. They are skills just like everything else we do that we practice. And they're, I think it's pretty easy to be thankful during the week of Thanksgiving, even the month of Thanksgiving, and even into the holidays, because we gather with family and friends, and there's a little lightness about us and lift in being able to do that. But I just encourage everyone to think about kindness and empathy every week. And, I remember years ago, my New Year's resolution was random acts of kindness. And little things like that just go so far in our world right now. And I think they're great skills for our students to learn. So I'm glad that the shift right now in education is moving in this direction, that we're talking about things like kindness and empathy in the classroom, because it's a skill. Maybe not the same skills reading and math, but something to be learned. So, and I did get to go to the View Ridge Elementary IR between now and the last meeting. And like the other IRs, every school is a little bit different, and it's just so much fun to be a part of them and be able to learn and see what we approve in these meetings in action. So I appreciate that quite a bit.
Can I interrupt really quick, Caroline? Because you said approved. At Forest View today, I actually saw those speaker things that are in the back of the room.
Oh, yeah.
And so the kindergarten teacher's up there talking, and I'm like, what is that voice? And it's hers. And she was sort of soft-spoken, so being all the way in the back of the room, it was sort of nice. I'm like, we paid for that. So it was when you can see what you do in action and how it impacts the classroom. It is really cool when we're there. So sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
It was just something
No, but it is fun for directors to be able to do that. Okay, so we will go ahead and move forward with the meeting, and item 9.0, public comments. Do we have any audience comments this evening? That is a no. Okay, well then we will go ahead and move forward with 10.0, our consent agenda, and I would ask Dr. Salzman to provide an overview.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Board of Directors, and to the public. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lifts, gifts, and grants and recurring contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently but are of routine business nature. These items are usually reviewed by the board in the Friday report, 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. This gives directors time to ask staff questions or to consider discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion. By its definition, a consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office received and answered one question regarding the personnel report. The consent agenda is presented as published for board approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Would any director like to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in the new business section of the agenda? Hearing no requests, we'll go ahead and move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, say no. The consent agenda is approved. Next item is strategic progress monitoring, and tonight we do not have a strategic progress monitoring item, so we will go ahead and move to our information and discussion. And our first item, 12.01, is a spotlight presentation on our career and technical education program. And I believe Dr. Boughton is going to provide that.
Yes, thank you, President Mason, directors, and Dr. Salzman. So this evening on the consent agenda, there was an item for board approval of the Carl Perkins Grant and the Career and Technical Education Comprehensive Needs Assessment. This is an annual item that's presented to the board for approval, but we wanted to make sure that we spotlighted some of the highlights from our CTE programs. To do this, I'd like to invite to the podium CTE Director Corey Gudgeon, and she will be sharing some of our brief highlights of our outstanding programs that we have in Everett Public Schools.
I am not sure how to do this. Just a second. And now, go back here. Now share screen. And now you can present. Okay, thank you. You're welcome. Good evening. My name is Corey Gudgeon, and like Dr. Boughton said, I am the new CTE Director for Everett Public Schools. I find this very much an honor to be able to serve in this capacity as a former Everett Public Schools teacher, to be able to step into this role. I get the pleasure this evening of giving a CTE Spotlight presentation to highlight some great things we have been working really hard on in CTE. This is a spotlight presentation of CTE, not to be confused with an evaluation presentation of CTE. I'm sorry. I need to add this really quick. So here you're looking at one of our students who works at a pet store. He's earning high school credit for his worksite learning opportunity here, and he's getting paid. In CTE, we are working really hard to evaluate what we are doing to reduce gaps in achievement among student groups. We are making sure that our career pathways are providing experiences and opportunities to ensure that our students are prepared to succeed in college and career, and making sure that we strengthen student wellness and engagement and safety. We have been working really hard to make sure that all of our career pathways are built on these student-centered program components, again, to make sure that we are preparing our students to successfully succeed in college and career. We are proud to have these active career and technical student leadership organizations connected to our career pathways, offering students extended learning opportunities to further their knowledge and skills by participating in activities, events, and competitions. In spotlighting career and technical school-based learning, we are proud that the medical and health careers pathway was able to launch a 2-period block class this fall in our new clinical space at Everett High School, where students are provided the opportunity to work towards the home care aide certification. Work-based learning is another area we are proud to spotlight, as we have been working really hard
to expand opportunities to include exploration, mentorship, and preparation for possible future careers. Work site learning experiences are part of work-based learning and provide students with the opportunity to learn in the workplace while applying skills from a qualifying class. Teacher Bree Youngberg has been working hard to grow enrollment in worksite learning experiences to include internal internships. And we are proud to report enrollment has increased to a total of 61 students just in the first month of school, which is up and higher than previous years for the total year. Now let's hear from one of our internal internship professional industry mentors about an opportunity we were able to set up at Jackson High School as a pilot for 2 students to be able to use the skills they used in their social media marketing class to apply to a worksite learning experience.
There's a revolution happening, and you can see it on the road, and you can see it in the parking lot of our schools, like these at Jackson High School. Hello, my name is Bill Truitt. I'm a teacher at Jackson High School and president of the Snohomish County Electric Vehicle Association. For this peaceful revolution to succeed, we need to communicate effectively and efficiently to our neighbors in Snohomish County. While the social media skills of my generation are improving, they are nothing compared to those of the younger generations. Students today grew up with social media. They are far more proficient, and they adapt quickly to new apps, whatever those are. The internship that I am leading with several Jackson students will allow our local association to tap into the skill base of our students. In return, they will be able to apply their knowledge to the real-world challenges of communicating a marketing message. It's a win-win-win. Our organization gets to harness the creative energy and skills of Everett Public Schools students. Students get to experience working in a project that extends well beyond the walls of the classroom. And together, we help advance the revolutionary transition away from fossil fuel vehicles to a 100% electric transportation system.
So the remarkable thing here is these 2 female students at Jackson High School were able to help this electric car club made up of middle-aged men with their social media skills. This is a pilot program with the intention to grow to other schools. So our Everett Career Link program consists of 3 separate courses now, which I'm very proud of because I was part of the 3 years ago when we started this, and it's now expanded to 3 courses. It serves students in grades 8 through 11, and we have doubled our enrollment just in the last summer for these programs. Goals for growing our CTE program in the future are to strive to continue to build thoughtful pathways that yield to industry-recognized working credentials, provide college credit, and competitively position our students so that they have choice and options upon graduating from high school, ensuring that our students are prepared to succeed in college and career in the future. There has been an emphasis to increase girls in STEM with opportunities. As you can see in this picture, we have 10 females and 8 males on this robotics team. Last year, we had 50% females and 50% males making up the course roster for our advanced engineering manufacturing program at Cascade High School. We are continuing to partner with industry and professional organizations to continue to work together to offer more STEM opportunities for girls. In addition to this, another area of emphasis is growing our career pathways to include students with disabilities to help provide possible alternative graduation pathways. To do this, we are continuing to work with STEM and other departments to expand career and technical opportunities across all of our pathways and our students. We are also placing other emphasis on growing the Port of Everett and Maritime Partnership to offer opportunities for our students to be able to explore and learn more about maritime in their backyard and be able to have a chance to make some connections to their possible future careers. Lastly, we are continuing to partner with industry professionals to work at expanding the information and communications pathway to include thoughtful progression of courses, including cybersecurity, that lead to industry-recognized working credentials. We are continuing to work at connecting the work we do in CTE to reduce gaps in achievement among student groups, working to open up more access to underrepresented students and students with disabilities, ensuring that each and every one of our students is prepared to succeed in college and career, and making sure that we strengthen wellness, engagement, and safety. Thank you so much for this opportunity this evening to be able to spotlight some highlights from CTE. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Great overview and highlights. I have a really big question, and I don't expect it actually to be answered tonight. But, you know, as I'm looking at all these different components of our CTE program, I'm looking at, you know, the work-based experience, the classes that we're now offering in our pathway programs, the organizations. Do we know, I'm sure we know, how many students we're touching through one of these options? So for example, when someone gets to 12th grade and graduation, what percentage of our students has had some kind of exposure to CTE, other than just maybe elective class they've taken?
So I can get more information out to you here in the next week on that, but I can tell you in November, our current enrollment, we're serving 7,422 students.
In CTE classes?
In CTE classes.
Okay.
But that's just
I
for
guess,
November.
you know, my question really is, what is our goal? Because I think that CTE pathways are really important for some students, and other students have other goals where some of that exposure would be great, but maybe not their focus. And I just kind of, in terms of percentages and stuff, I'm like, where is our growth and where are our opportunities? I'm just trying to better understand that.
So for me personally, my goal is that CTE is for every student, whether they're college bound or career oriented, or maybe they don't know, but CTE is for every student.
Yeah.
And I think I would just like to add, one of the things that I think is most important for the CTE STEM Choice Programs Department is really ensuring that we don't just have CTE courses, that we actually have viable pathways, so that it's not just taking, oh, this sounds like a cool course, I want to take this, but really, hey, I'm very interested in this field, and ensuring that we have distinct pathways so that a student can say, I'm going to take cybersecurity and then this, and also this. So when I graduate from high school, I have a career path planned out, and or I might even have a certification so that I'm able to go into that field of interest. So It's been a part of the work that the CTE department has really started to cultivate, where it's not just one-off classes because we can, it's really thinking very intentionally around developing a pathway that's sustainable for post-secondary success for students, whether it be university, college, or career.
I think maybe that's a better focus for my question, was sort of how many students are in a more focused pathway or program, or really, you know, getting a much more in-depth experience with, you know, an internship or those kind of things, versus a student that has an extra period and this class looks really fun and it was a great experience, but not, you know, really the focus. So anyhow, and there may not be a specific answer to that. It's more a wondering of, you know, how are we doing in terms of getting kids into those broader, robust programs?
Yeah, we can actually put some data together and take a look at specifically an exploration of that we can communicate to the board for you.
Right. Thank you.
Today, how many certificates do we hand out at the conclusion of maybe 2 years worth of kids going along one particular pathway for a certificate, i.e. it be Microsoft, Office suite abilities or whatever it is. How many different types of certificates do you know of that our kids have received in high school?
Go ahead.
So we have several types of we call them industry recognized credentials, but certificates. We are working to identify at least one industry recognized certificate per course. We're getting a lot of guidelines from the state around that. But I will have to send out information to you to get hard numbers.
Or the different types, the different types that are available. So that we can at least say to our kids, these are the type of certificates you can get right here in high school.
Right.
It may not be an end of a career, or it would be a beginning of a career. It's not like you want to be an office suite manager or something like that, or, Excel and database of whatever, but it will be the start of a career path.
We can provide data on the types of certificates we offer in Everett Public Schools, and then the number of students that have received those certificates in the last year or two, if that would be helpful, just to kind of give you a broader picture of what are the certification programs that we have. I know there are some that are kind of burgeoning as well, and so we can provide the board that data.
And I'm not just mentioning technology. I know there are other things.
Of course.
But, we all know about those particular Microsoft certificates that they give out. So, or have as journeyman level kind of employees.
Right.
So what other kinds of certificates are available?
I guess I have a question about dual credit opportunities for those kids that, I know one of the classes my daughter took was, because CTE, you have to get so many credits for the 24 credits, was art and CTE. But how much of the classes, especially Snow Isle, this is like the whole program sort of stuff, for those kids that might not be classroom, might not be science, might not be math, all those, all the divergent minds, that they can get dual credit for being in a CTE class that is, math is hidden. It's part of the process. Science is part of the process. Reading is part of the process. So they can get dual credit while they're going for that specific pathway to sort of really, we can put a kid on their right trajectory based on their strengths.
Yeah, we can give you a report as well as to local equivalencies, which is kind of what you're talking about, where, our engineering manufacturing program, kids earn credit for Algebra 2, they earn, credit for English. We have those equivalencies in place. Not every one of our CTE courses has an equivalency like that, but we also have courses that offer what's called Cte Dual Credit, which is where we're articulated with like Everett Community College, for example. Our anatomy and physiology course at Everett High School, actually all three of our comprehensive high schools, is articulated with Everett Community College's human anatomy and their medical assistant program, as well as our medical terminology class that is articulated with their medical terminology. And the reason why we strive for that is because in the medical area, those are the two courses, no matter what a student wants to do after high school, whether it's a certificate local program at a community college, or whether they want to go on to a four-year university, those two classes are transferable and the start of their journey.
And is that something the counselors really do work with the students so that making sure they get their 24 credits, making sure they're choosing correctly the right classes so that they can get in that trajectory and fill in gaps for what doesn't match dual credit and everything? Is it tougher I'm guessing it is tougher for some kids, but is that where you can work with the counselors or
all of our students have high school and beyond plans, which start in middle school. And our counselors are very intentional about taking the time to really work with the students on mapping out that high school and beyond plan. And it's continually revisited on their academic journey from middle school through high school. You probably already know this. And when we get into the high school level, yes, the counselors, they come out into the classes. CTE, we partner, other departments partner with the counselors to try to really help inform students and their families of the opportunities as well as the requirements, but what they can do to meet those requirements to hopefully get them closer to their, end goal, whether it be career, whether it be college, something else,
And also the state requirements. So
Yeah.
thank you.
But I can get information out to you all about what local equivalencies currently exist with our courses, as well as CTE Dual Credit. And then
Thank
the
you.
other things that we talked about tonight.
Are you open to
Thank you.
Pandora's box?
I know. Are there any other questions, or have they been covered?
I just had just a quick question, just about Everett High, and I just see that they're a little lower in number of the on-site, the work site programs. Is there it looks like historically they've been lower. Is there a reason for that?
So I did some digging into that. Everett High, the teacher is a 0.2 FTE. Cascade and Jackson, that teacher, that worksite learning teacher, is split 50% between Cascade and Jackson. So that is one thing to look at. The other thing, and this is more of a state and maybe national thing, the other thing is shifting our mindset when we think about work-based learning opportunities. Work-based learning opportunities and worksite learning opportunities historically were thought as an opportunity for students to gain more credit to graduate. We are shifting away from that. Those opportunities need to be for every student, whether it's exploration, volunteer, internships, and maybe even paid. So the whole state is kind of trying to shift, because historically forever, for my entire life, work-based learning and worksite learning was thought as kind of like credit recovery, or just a catch up to try to get some of our students over the hump to graduate.
So could you use more support financially from the board on that? I mean, as we look at our budgets for the upcoming year and saying, do we need to dedicate a 0.5 FTE at Everett to get those numbers up so that there's parity in terms of offerings?
I think as we also, because staffing is also driven by demand as well. So when you have, so it's really kind of that chicken or the egg, right? So when we have a robust program that actually provides students with a really well-developed pathway and interesting courses, then we have a higher demand, which then allows us to add some of that FTE with that. So I think as we continue to develop the CTE programs across the district and make a really robust plan, I think that we're going to have more interest. And when we have more interest, then the FTE will follow.
Okay, that would be great. And then my last little question is Trades Up. Are we going to be able to get back there this year to do a Trades Up day so that our folks can see what it is to physically do those trades?
So personally, I don't want to promise anything.
Oh, come on.
I love the Trades Up Day. I think we could do a better job marketing it and recruiting students. I don't know what that would look like right now. I'm just being honest with you.
I think it's our hope that we'll be able to parlay that back. I think we've been impacted obviously by COVID, and I think that as we're hopefully shifting out as more people get vaccinated, the opportunities to do events like Trades Up will continue to bloom and blossom, and we'll be able to fulfill that need. So that's our hope, but we're still in progress.
Okay, thank you.
I just had a really quick comment. It was really cool for me to watch this presentation because, looking at the career and technical student leadership organizations, like my best friend is a president of FFA, and Mr. Truitt is one of my teachers and was my teacher freshman year. So I just wanted to say this stuff is really entrenched and recognized and participated in by so many students and staff, and it's just such a relevant part of the school community that sometimes you don't even think of it as like specifically CTE. It's just like a part of a student's educational experience as a whole. And it's really becoming ingrained in our educational system, at least from what I've seen in my experience and my peers' experience. it's just really cool to see all of this be highlighted and grouped together in that way, because I feel like these things sort of, they just feel like a part of the day, which is a really good thing, but it's cool to see the recognition of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for a great presentation. A few more questions than anticipated, but a lot of interest, so that's a good thing.
Yes.
So thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I would like to invite our Budget Director, Ruth Floyd, to the lectern to provide a fourth quarter financial update.
Thank you. Good evening. Where is the, oh, there we go. Okay. All right.
Nice job.
I don't do it as often as some people here. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, you did an excellent job.
The fourth quarter financial report is similar to previous quarterly reports, but has a few additional slides to summarize year-end status. It will include information on 5 funds as normal. Board Docs also includes a companion monthly financial report for August that you also have access to. First, we'll go over general fund. Revenues and transfers in from capital projects exceeded expenditures by $2 million. Ending fund balance was 11.9% of total expenditures. 9.4% of that is unassigned, which means it doesn't have as many restrictions as some of the other portion of the balance. Per state law, we separate our general fund into 2 subfunds. One is the local levy subfund, and one is the state and federal main balance. And local levy and the state and federal balances, they both increased from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And as I mentioned before, the total was about $2 million higher. Our annual average enrollment for the year was 19,670 FTE, which is 737 under budget due to the effects of COVID. This is how we're funded, and so revenues also decreased, but expenditures also went down due to fewer staff. Total revenues and transfers were $331.5 million. Compared to the July projection, that's about a 0.1% variance higher. And August and September levy collections were higher than expected in the fourth quarter due to timing of receipts. So our fall collections started coming in a bit earlier. And state revenues were lower due to transportation revenues being lower, and our but expenditures offset that. So we get what we spend in the transportation area. Federal revenues were higher due to ESSER funds, but expenditures offset most of that. Expenditures were $329.5 million, lower than board authorized appropriations. And the variance from July was about 0.3% difference, lower than we had projected in July. Lower expenditures really does have to do with us doing school differently. Some traditional costs were either not applicable in remote learning, or a major function of it allowing for reimbursement with ESSER funds. So some of the examples include lower sub-costs, fewer in-person professional development, vacant positions, and MSOC materials. August ending fund balance was at $39.2 million. As I mentioned, that's 11.9%. And fund balance is differentiated between, we look at total versus, and then also unassigned. There's a board policy that says that we'll keep a 5% ending fund balance, and we are above that. And then unassigned, that we will target 2.5, at least 2.5%, which we are above that. Over time, fund balances do fluctuate. In the early 2010s, it decreased for strategic investments in program, and then we had fiscal restraint due to funding uncertainties from the levy cliff and regionalization, and then COVID, of course. Fund balances are expected to decrease in future years, though. And then this is just kind of a 10-year look at where our fund balance has been. As you can see, we have increased over the past few years. To bring it all together, though, we have, as a summary, although we had lower enrollment and state revenues last year, expenditure decreases more than offset that due to remote learning. And capital projects fund, revenues and expenditures were lower than budget due to not having a bond sale. The ballot measure was not passed by the voters. And the bond balance is decreasing, but revenues were supported by state construction assistance, mainly the Woodside project, and local impact fees. In debt service, balances are lower also due to not having a bond sale that had been budgeted, and but of course sufficient to pay the remaining debt, and fund balance is in line with trends. That uptick in August of 2019 that you see there, that was increased due to the final 2016 bond sale that happened in August of 2019. And then ASB fund, revenues and expenditures are under budget, more so than in prior years due to COVID-19 effects on student activities. And ending balance decreased in the fourth quarter due to increased in-person activities. So it looks like we are getting a bit more back to normal, and we expect those trends to continue this year. And transportation vehicle fund, August fund balance was $165,000. Last year we paid for 4 buses, and the balance there is enough to pay for another 2 to replace the 2 of the buses that will phase out over the coming year. And I am happy to answer any questions. And Mr. Moore as well.
Thank you. Directors, are there questions regarding the budget?
I just want to thank you. It always is very clear, and I really appreciate the presentation, so thank you.
Oh, of course. Thank you.
I just had a question about the fund balance. And so are we going to spend that money? I assume, I mean, that's a lot of money. And so I know there's probably a plan, but I mean, I just want to make sure strategically, it doesn't have to be a detailed answer, just that we are looking at that being abnormally high and that we're going to start spending it down with some normal expenditures. Okay.
Yes, okay. We have the issue also with regionalization. There are 2 more years where that's going to be phased out. And we do have kind of that structural deficit that, that we've been talking about, and that was incorporated into the 21-22 budget. However, this higher beginning fund balance than we expected, as well as, unfortunately, some of the savings associated with staffing, not being able to hire staffing and so on, that will help also the budget for next year, which means that we can put more of that into program.
And I guess it may, sorry, can I follow up, Madam? Because I think it's going to be important to have a narrative. And again, it doesn't have to be now or whatever, just to have a narrative for the public about our spending habits. Because as we go out for levy funding, it looks like we have a fairly good, nest egg. And it's like, wait a minute, we're asking for X when we have Y. And so just making sure that we understand just strategically how that's going to decrease because of everything you've just talked about, so that we all as officials have that kind of language in our pocket.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think the only thing would add is that we're also cognizant that the lower expenditures and the federal resources has delayed the structural deficit a couple of years, and we have some obligations in the future. And if we aren't supported by the legislature at that point, then these resources will sustain some of the programs, or hopefully a lot of the programs that are currently being funded and are of high value to our students.
Absolutely. But just so we understand the structural deficits, I mean, that seems like a lifetime ago, because I think we all remember why they got there and McCleary. But it literally, for a lot of folks in our public, it was like a million years ago. It was pre-COVID. I'm just being super frank. And so just so we can have that narrative of like, not just regionalization, but this is what it means for staffing salaries. And this is us being very good stewards of finances that are very fluid and fluctuating. So thank you.
That was my exact comment. Concern is we've had an increasing fund balance for 7 years now. And there's always something in the future that, we're saving for, whether it's if we're 2 years into regionalization, but our fund balance continues to go up, I just want to make sure that we're being, it's important. It's this very fine balance, and it's important to save for these potential situations that come up. But when you look at 7 years of an increasing fund balance, I feel like maybe there's some opportunity there, because I want to make sure it's going into classrooms and helping kids.
Most definitely.
So we appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Floyd. Mr. Moore. Okay, that is our 2 information and discussion items for tonight, which takes us to unfinished business. And tonight we do not have any unfinished business, which takes us to new business, item 14.0 in our agenda. And 14.01 is approval of legislative priorities 2022. Mr. Moore.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a fairly succinct presentation, as you've seen in the agenda packet. I'm going to move through it very quickly. I just want to, again, thank the board for your participation in the WASDA process universally, and participation in creating these priorities, and Dr. Saltzman as well for his guidance on focusing on the 3 big rocks. And I think that's really our success going forward. Just a brief update. As I think we know, it's a 60-day short session, second year of the biennial session. And it is generally focused just on housekeeping and maintenance level budgets, not necessarily the overall budget picture. March to September, however, we did see a significant increase in revenue projections by 6.7 million. And I think even from that today, that has increased to over 8.5 million, possibly 10, based upon who is predicting the outcomes over the next biennium, the rest of this one.
That's 6.7 million or billion?
Billion.
Thank you.
Billion, excuse me if I said million, yes. And so I think what that makes us ponder is to the extent in which these priorities can, at least we can begin to get some early action on some of the needs, and then focus on the biennial session in the following year. We did have, at the time of creating this presentation, understanding that the Senate is in a hybrid mode, and while they will allow up to 3 people to come and visit them, it's very limited in terms of access, and that may change. I know that the House has also announced that they're going fully remote, and it sounds as though you might be able to meet them outside of the state facilities. Nevertheless, you'll see at the end of this that puts WASDA, WASA, WASBO in a situation of another virtual conference in the spring. I'm sorry, at the end of January. So I think attachment to your agenda item, I do have the WASA legislative priorities, as well as the School Funding Coalition. And the School Funding Coalition, I think over my time in working with the legislative priorities, it's nice to see that all of our state agencies are uniting and aligning their message together. And so I do appreciate that, and that's attached for your review, as well as the superintendent of public instruction. And those are pretty much the focuses. I think probably the strongest focus is the prototypical school model, knowing that maybe there are certain classifications this year, such as nurses or counselors or social emotional support, that could be the first step in increasing funding for our system. As I mentioned last year, these were 3 big rocks. We really wanted the legislature to act early in the session to maintain K-12 investment, which they did. We wanted them to address the adverse impacts of the pandemic on the physical health and social emotional needs. I think the federal funding stepped in to the extent of helping us in that way, but there was also some assistance for districts that didn't have an excess or didn't have a large amount of ESSER funding to provide those supports. And then, as we know, we did not, and we continue to ask for a simple majority on bonds. This particular year, I think with the opening of school, the WASDA Association really put off their Legislative Priorities Conference until the very end of October. And I know Director Nichols, as our legislative representative, was in attendance. They also initiated 133 statewide submittals, and they asked us collectively, which the cabinet made your recommendation, to identify our top 15 out of a quite an array of proposals. And as we looked at those proposals and say, what are the 3 rocks? It was apparent that they really kind of fell into 3 categories. Sustainable funding. As you can see, there's a number of items here that were related to sustainable funding, and behavior or recovery and student supports highlighted in the blue, and finally diversity, equity, and inclusion. So of those were then grouped together, and we began to create our legislative priorities proposed to you tonight for 2022. You will see that in the attachment, which I'm holding up before you, that they're in paragraph form, but just for simplicity and clarity, I've broken them into some bullets here. And I'd also say that you'll see these language common. They're phrases that are common in the WASA, School Funding Coalition. And so the phrasing should be familiar to legislatures if they see them. In fact, I think this particular title right here is straight from one of the WASA topics. So it really is provide consistent, equitable, and ample education resources, hold districts harmless from the adverse impacts of COVID on state funding formulas driven by enrollment, transportation ridership, and including levies, because if you remember last year, districts who were based upon a per pupil levy lid are affected by the lower enrollment, and that was extended for 1 year, and districts are looking for an extension of 1 more year until our enrollment recovers, as we hope it will very soon. Fulfill the legislative commitment to increase the current unrealistic state-funded staffing ratios contained in the prototypical school model. I think you'll find that statement also within one of the WASA documents. And finally, address the statewide funding shortfalls in special education, well documented, and we're all aware of the need for that as a group of districts. The second one is invest in learning recovery and the physical health and social emotional needs of students and families. We recognize that much of this is being supported at this point in time by ESSER funds, but we also recognize that those ESSER funds have a limited life, and at the point in time when we reach the full expenditure of the federal supports, we need to be aware that these supports are not just a one-time event as a result of COVID, but something that we need to sustain going forward. So one-time federal investments will end, and I think I listed several programs here. And then finally, the third one is advance equity in public education. And this really contains a lot of different elements, from technology to dual credits to professional development for families to learn how to do distant learning, to educational opportunities that we've learned. I think one of them has to do with equity in public education. And it's really talking a lot about just having the ability to have a structured public education acknowledgement between basic ed and ALE, alternative learning. So I think this, hopefully it encapsulates the intent of the board as we begin conversations. We do have that closing statement here as we did last year, just recognizing and thanking them. We know that the last year was a fiscal challenge, and now the outlook's quite different, and we're asking for them to begin investments now. And then finally, the next steps, I did not put on here right now, but I know that the superintendent's office is trying to schedule an interaction with the third week in December with our local legislatures, as we normally do. The session begins January 10th. The day on the Hill will be virtual. I've confirmed that, and I think there's some announcements for signups today. And finally, the Legislative Assembly and outreach, we'll have to get more information on what the intent of the board is and on what to do at that point in time based upon how it worked last year. And then finally, we look for the regular session to end on time. So moving through pretty quickly, if we're asking the board, if there's wordsmithing or something that you see tweaking, we can happy to make minor accommodations and ask you to approve the legislative priorities.
Thank you. Great overview. I have a question regarding the second item, our second big rock, I guess. It says invest in learning recovery in the physical health. But when I look at the items below that, how you broke it out, I don't see, I guess my question is, what is physical health and what are we investing in there? Because it doesn't really speak to it in the bullets below. Or I didn't see it, I missed it, I guess.
The behavioral specialists.
That would be social emotional, wouldn't it?
It really is pertaining to the physical environment and the safety aspects of making sure our students are secure. I'm trying to think of a way of adjusting that. The mental.
Well, it seems to me that if you're talking about physical health, you should be talking about school lunches, things like that.
Well, I don't know. I guess that's what my question is
Right.
What is physical health? Are we talking about PPE in classrooms and extra masks? Are we talking about feeding kids, or is it all the above? And
it really is referring to also the physical space in which they are working in. I have to look, and I apologize, I'll have to look at that particular WASDA element.
I think the way that it reads, I guess, is it says essentially, if you take away in learning recovery, it's invest in the physical health. And so it suggests that we're investing in the student's health.
Yeah, I see that.
And so if it is more about the classroom environment, then I'm not sure, to me, it's not obvious, I guess.
Okay.
If that's what the goal is.
Okay.
And I don't know where that would come from. Would that come from school construction then? Because, if we're talking about HVAC systems and things like that,
no.
That's the type of physical health that you're talking about. Because physical health, it doesn't look like it's really explicitly put in any of the 15 priorities that we put forth.
Yeah, I think this is a phrase that I captured from one of the other associations. So maybe it would be more helpful to say learning recovery and the social emotional needs of students and families. And probably what we could convert that to is mental health and social emotional needs, if there is that level of differentiation.
I think mental health is covered pretty well under social emotional needs. But to the first rock, we rated the shortfall in special education funding pretty high on our list, and yet it's mentioned last year. And I know the whole harmless thing is kind of it's been one of the things that we've talked about pretty consistently, but to me this seems like we need to adjust that to kind of reflect.
So move that up to be the first bullet.
Unless any directors feel differently, but.
Oh, I would agree with you there, because one of the concerns I have is that will continue to be an issue. And even with the state funding basic education, no, hold harmless because as a result of the COVID, as well as the levy cap. All of that is going to always be the situation. But I think in one respect, we need to ensure that the legislators' commitment to being realistic is important. Because we always say, hold us harmless. Well, I think they've heard that. But I know you don't want to stop saying that, but I don't want it to be just something that we constantly say and still get no benefit from it from the legislature, in a sense that they hear that all the time. So what new thing are we trying to present to them? We need to be realistic on the prototypical school modeling. We need to be more specific on special education funding. That's a definite, because we've seen that a shortfall in those two regards.
I think the hold harmless though, it's pretty specific about the adverse impacts of COVID. And it talks about enrollment and transportation. That's, to me, pretty pointed. It's
Right.
not just a general hold harmless, it's talking about those two specifically. And the levy.
That's not really part of our legislative priorities, though. It's the hold harmless piece. Transportation funding is one thing. All those other things are part of it, but it's not really a hold harmless. I think what it really comes down to is if they want to hold us harmless, they need to fully fund basic education, up to and including special education.
But I think that's not what that's saying, that first bullet. I think the hold harmless is because the reduction in student counts and transportation counts has gone down, and it's impacting our funding specifically because of COVID.
Right, because we fund our schools in crazy ways by random metrics. And if we're going to fully fund the education, like that needs to be the priority.
You're talking about transportation funding model rather than the transportation or the shortfall from COVID.
Yeah, because it's just a symptom of a larger problem, right? These problems were there prior to COVID. The potential for them was there prior to. COVID just made them more obvious. To me, anyways.
Well, the initial bullet is related to COVID in the structure. There is separate calls, you're right, for a revised transportation funding formula. We in particular weren't as impacted by the current formula. And the intent of this is just to keep forefront that there are some requests by the fellow agencies to deal with that. I can see where putting statewide shortfall and special education, so up on top, and then the prototypical school model second, because that is a more longer term element. But in the short term, I would say number one is short term, the other two are long term. And they are quick tweaks. I know that there's people trying to write a bill relative to the levy formula. And I think that OSPI is seeing that statewide enrollment is low enough that they are probably going to ask for some sort of, and they're calling it hold harmless because it's a common language we're using to cover the lower enrollment that still exists for many districts. So what I hear you saying is, let's move special education to the top and the first bullet to the bottom. Is that okay?
I'm fine.
I could do that, yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think it's special education. I think it's the second bullet to the top and the first bullet to the bottom, right? Because it's social emotional.
Okay.
We rated special education total as kind of one of the top 5, right? So.
But special education is part of this providing consistent, equitable, and ample educational resources.
I think to Pam's point, it's something that has been underserved and has been, to use the term, structural deficit in education funding for a long time, and it's high time that is at the top of our list.
Oh, I see. So in the paragraph, moving it up?
Right. Because I feel like you read hold harmless and your eyes glaze over, right?
Yeah.
You've heard it so many times.
Heard it all the time.
I don't, there's gotta be a better way to say it that's simple, that's direct, to the point, concise.
Well, and to your point too, it's almost like address the statewide shortfall in special ed funding, then fulfill your commitment and also hold us harmless for the effects of COVID. Because it's the first one is not done, the second one is not done, and the third one really is impacting us.
Yeah.
Okay, you got the change?
I do.
Okay,
Get
I
rid
think
of,
he heard us.
get rid of hold harmless.
No, keep
No,
hold harmless.
no, we're
Keep
just
hold harmless.
reorganizing.
Reversing.
Okay.
Sentence 1 becomes sentence 3, so you're just reversing the paragraph.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay,
I agree with, I'm using accountable talk. I agree with Director Nichols. But then bullet 2 is becoming bullet 1.
I think he's got it.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just confirming for myself.
Okay.
Okay, and here we are combining those social emotional supports, and so we do cover it in the subcategory, but if we change the mental health and social emotional needs, it is then the subparagraph that breaks out some of the things we're talking about.
I think to Director Nichols, that mental is covered in social emotional needs.
Okay,
So we don't need to add that.
so
I think the
probably,
question is, what is the physical health that we're getting at? And that might be something you need to get back to us on.
Okay.
If you don't have that answer tonight.
I don't have that answer tonight, but I can get back to you that.
And looking at the draft document itself, I would also, I don't like using, when we're talking about goals, I don't like using really kind of weak language isn't the term I want to use, but this part where resources to enhance or at least sustain, to me that it's kind of hedging, right? It's hedging.
Yeah,
It needs
it's
to
hedging,
be
yeah.
really clear and succinct. So provide additional resources to sustain and enhance learning recovery efforts to assist students academically. And then you can get rid of mental health there.
I wonder though about mental health versus social emotional learning, because mental health really being the anxiety, the depression, the eating disorders, all of that stuff that impacts learning versus social emotional.
Well, you learn one to recognize the other, right? If students don't have a language to communicate how they feel, to name it, which is what social emotional learning kind of covers, and how to regulate that, then they don't, it's going to be harder for them to understand when mental health care, those types of things are more applicable and more needed. So I think mental health wellness is well encapsulated by social emotional learning.
Okay. Dr. Scott, you had a good comment that
I
might.
just had a quick thought. I'm wondering if it's just the word health, right, as an all-encompassing term to incorporate mental health, social emotional health, and well-being. Is the more universal term helpful in this respect to keep we can qualify that in the end, but maybe the more universal term would be helpful.
Thank you.
Health, I like that, instead of breaking it down.
Okay. And then any comments on the third bullet? I heard Director Nichols, you mentioned that in the statement below, that that the comment related to, excuse me, it was related to the funding, or at least maintain funding. I think that is a point that I noted that we can adjust there. I know it is referring to, and it's not overtly there, that it's referring to ESSER funding and maintain the funding levels that we're able to achieve to accomplish that.
Right, I just think we should be more assertive in that language.
Okay, that's noted too.
And then for advancing equity, provide school districts the resources. To me, this whole thing should probably be broken out into different sentences, but I think the main thing here, and it goes back to funding, is adequately funding basic education and staffing levels, right? So that we can provide all of these things. So that if there's a way to, provide school district the resources or fully fund education so that we can provide these equitable learning opportunities, those types of things.
So my only comment would be that with a short session and you're looking for quick identifiable strikes we can make, addressing the full deal is something more potentially appropriate for a biennial session. And that when we prepare the students to support us, we'll focus with examples under each of these that sort of bring that feeling to it, because they're not likely to fully fund special education. They're likely to make tweaks, and they're likely to, if we can emphasize and influence them in those specifics rather than being more general with an overarching request.
Sure, and I mean, that was just kind of something off the top of my head. I'm sure that can be better said, but this isn't just our legislative priority for the short session. This is our legislative priority for the next year until we do it again, right?
It's the legislative priorities for this 60-day session, yes.
So we're after the 60 days, we're not going to care about any of these?
No, excuse me.
Well, this is what I'm saying, right? Is that we are identifying these as our 2022 legislative priorities until we make new legislative priorities. So they're going to last any time outside of this past 60 days. If I'm talking to a legislator, I'm still going to be talking about these. These last beyond 60 days. And these are a reflection of our values. So I would like them to be as robust and clear as possible. And that's just my personal opinion.
So I guess I'm not entirely clear at this time where we are with changes. So what are you asking, or what are you requesting?
The last one, it just needs to be a little bit clearer, right? I understand that we're going to have students talking about access, equity, things like that under this as far as examples go for this session. But I think that the language used in this particular paragraph, it's one giant run-on sentence. It needs to be broken up. It needs to be much clearer the way you would talk to somebody about it.
Could I make a suggestion that you work directly with Mr. Moore to, after the meeting, to help clarify specifically what you have in mind, and maybe the two of you can come to a consensus to present to the rest of us?
I have every confidence that our cabinet can edit it down to where it needs to be. I am not the person for it. I am very wordy when I write. So I know from a personal perspective that.
But this is the cabinet's version.
Right.
But I do see what he said, though, a big run-on sentence. It's and to recruit, so it's just like period, each student. Because you have two bullets.
Okay, is my question, is this a content issue or is it a grammatical issue? For the two of you?
A little bit of both.
Little bit of both.
Yeah, and I wonder too, though, to Andrew's point, though, because I do tend to agree that if we have the opportunity to talk to legislators, that we're not asking for them to recreate the wheel this session because it's not possible, but how do they plan for 2023 and the future? And how do they really look to the future to really do the heavy lifting? I don't know how to ask that on this.
So
I think
maybe-
this speaks to the future.
Maybe what this is, the confusing piece about this is that it is broken into bullets. The actual statement within the document is, provide school districts with the resources and flexibility to ensure equitable learning opportunities, access for each student, and to recruit, support, and retain effective staff who reflect the diversity of our students and populations. That's what the document says, and this is.
No, I'm reading the document. That's why I'm
Okay.
saying it's one large
Okay.
run-on sentence. And it needs to be a little bit clearer in the way that we talk
Break it
about
into chunks.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll tell you what we'll do. If you can, any input you can give us, we will clean it up. And is there a timeline that we have to get this done by the 14th, or does it have to be done?
At this point in time, we're looking at the 15th or the 16th to meet
Okay,
with.
so we have a board meeting the 14th.
Right.
We'll have it perfectly prepared. Any input you can give us, please do send to us, because
Yep.
I think what I'm hearing from the board tonight is just more specifics.
Okay.
So this is a document that when we talk to legislators, it's meat, and it goes on not just for this session, but overall sessions and
Yeah.
sending a theme. So anything you could send us, we'll even tweak it. We'll send it back to how we tweak it. And then we can be real crisp when we present on the 14th.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments, or are we comfortable with that? Okay.
Go ahead and bring your stuff up and we'll get that engaged.
Back on, back off.
Well, thank you. And tonight, the first of 4 policies for your consideration. First, policy 1611, Code of Ethics, are provided by WASDA to support school boards in articulating their core ethical standards. The revisions include changing the title from Code of Ethics to Ethical Conduct for School Board Directors. The existing policy language in policy 1611 has been updated to be consistent with the newly added language from WASDA, but remains holistically intact. Proposed revisions to policy 1611, Code of Ethics, have previously been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent. And so the revisions here that you see is to include the new language from WASDA, while still making slight revisions for consistency with the language with your existing policy.
Directors, are there any questions regarding the proposed revisions to policy 1611?
I think this is really clear. So thank you.
Very clear.
Hearing none, we will move it to second reading.
Thank you. Second on our agenda tonight is revisions to policy 1822, continuing education for board members, are to clarify and include the 2 types of training required by law for school board members to include open government training and cultural competency, equity, diversity, and inclusion training as recently established by Senate Bill 5044. Specifically, each member of a board of directors shall complete an open government training no later than 90 days after they take their oath of office or assume their duties, and must also receive a refresher training at intervals of no more than every 4 years, so long as they remain on the school board. In addition, beginning with the 2022 calendar year, each member of a board of directors shall complete a governance training program aligned with the cultural competency, diversity, equity, and inclusion standards for school director governance developed and provided by WASDA once per term of elected office and within 2 years of appointment or certification of their election. Proposed revisions to policy 1822, continuing education for board members, have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting. And as you can see in the revisions here, it's that open government training, and specifically then the cultural competency and equity, diversity, inclusion training that is now required by law for board members.
I have a question. I guess it's a question for the secretary of the board and the excellent executive secretaries, administrative assistants, what I've done, sorry. I don't know the last time I took open public meeting, or if I take the equity, how will I know that I'm doing it every term? Is somebody helping us manage that? Make sure we're staying compliant?
We could certainly check on that for you to
Yeah.
make sure that you have enough
And if,
training
and if,
points.
and if I can request that somebody do keep us compliant?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I don't have a problem with this. It's just a matter of I like to follow rules, so I need help.
We'll send out reminders.
Thank you.
I do know that WASDA, for their cultural competency, equity, diversity, and inclusion training, has already started that process of maintaining a record of those directors within the state that have completed so many of their 9 hours of training.
9 hours?
9 hours. And if you took the class during the conference, you received 2.25 or 2.5 hours of that 9 hours of training. And it has to be done by WASDA and nobody else.
Well, sorry. Can I say? Yeah. So it can be, but they can also, I think they're going to eventually provide a list, like WASDA approved list. So it doesn't, so for instance, if we had a board retreat, we could have somebody off of that list come in and do that 9-hour training for us as a board.
From WASDA.
Yeah, as long as, yeah. So like if Bill De La Cruz was, that was okay, then he could come in, do that training for us during that retreat, and we could just kind of all check that box. But it would meet the standards that WASDA, has set
We
up.
will keep track of, as that evolves, because since this is a new requirement, we'll make sure that our district is up to speed on who can offer the training and how it might happen so that we can make it as convenient as possible. And maybe not all 9 hours at the summer workshop, but maybe we do part of it, or we'll look into that, definitely.
Right, because at the conference, you only got credit for 2.5 hours of that 9.
To reflect the board's conversation is the paragraph that I've put onto the screen here about that as members of WASDA, this board has access to those resources, but it's not limited to only them providing them to fulfill the requirements.
Okay, any further questions or comments on policy 1822? We will go ahead and move this to second reading.
Third tonight is proposed new policy 1825, addressing school board director violations, is provided by WASDA to support school boards in establishing a fair and neutral process if a school board director's deliberate or continuing violation of the law, board policies, or lapses in good judgment adversely impact the board's ability to govern effectively. New policy 1825, addressing school board director violations, have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent. And so in conjunction with 1611, you can see that this is the actual process by which the board would approach a member who is conducting themselves in the violation of law, policy, or without good judgment.
I just had a really quick question. Something I noticed is that the cross references is board policy 1611, code of ethics. And then in the one we just looked over, it's changing the name of code of ethics to ethical conduct for school board directors. So would that change subsequently after 1611 was passed? Would that interfere with? Okay, I was just curious.
Until the title change is approved upon second reading by the board, we can't present it that way yet.
Okay.
But you are correct. We go back and we change that as just a clerical edit. Good
Very
catch.
good catch.
Does item under policy statement, item 4, I don't see it, it doesn't address voting rights. Is that something that can only be removed by having a recall on a director, or can directors still continue to have voting rights even if they're censured?
That's a great question, and I wouldn't want to misspeak by not providing you the correct information tonight. It's something I'm happy to go research and provide to the superintendent for you.
Having been in a situation in which a board member was censured, they still continue to have voting rights.
The electorate bestows our voting rights on us, and so the board can censure us like
can't-
committees.
can you speak up?
Sorry, the electorate bestows our voting rights on us, and so like you can censure, take people off of committees, say you can't go to WASDA conferences, you can't, have access to the upstairs rooms, but we can't take that voting right is given by a body
That
bigger
was
than us.
my understanding. Yeah, okay.
So what are you saying?
They still have voting rights?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, any further questions on this policy? We will go ahead and move 1825 to second reading.
And finally, this evening, policy 6970, naming schools and facilities, have been revised to comply with RCW 28A 320-296 regarding the use of Native American names, symbols, and images as school mascots, logos, or team names. This new law becomes in effect on January 1st, 2022, and prohibits the inappropriate use of Native American mascots in public schools. Any use of Native American names, symbols, and images for such purposes now requires consultation and authorized use of the name, symbol, or image as a mascot, logo, or team name through the appropriate tribal enactment or resolution by our local affiliation, which is the Tulalip Tribes. Revisions also include changing the title from naming schools and facilities to naming schools, facilities, and teams, and use of school mascots, images, or logos. Revised policy 6970, naming schools and facilities, have been reviewed by legal counsel and the superintendent's executive cabinet prior to tonight's meeting.
I have one question regarding, at the beginning of our meeting and at some school functions, they read the land acknowledgement. And at some school functions, they do have a symbol, a picture, an image that might be Native in focus. Will we have to go back to our tribe, Tulalip Tribes here, to get approval to use that image or that decal that we use sometime at different schools for land acknowledgement?
I think I understand your question about the image that we have on our land acknowledgement that's been associated with that.
Right.
I would have to get more information about our collaboration at the time that we chose that image to give you an answer that's accurate.
Because at some schools, they use a different one. So the concern I have is, will we have to go back for each individual one, or will we invoke one consistent image that is approved throughout the district?
So if I may actually answer the question, one of the image that we utilize for the land acknowledgement is a recognition by the National Arts Foundation, I believe it is. And it is actually an image that is a Tulalip image for the purpose of a land recognition. So the image that we utilize, like at the beginning of this meeting, where you see the, I think it's a Wick-Wack Wheel, and it's by Ty Juvenile, who is a Tulalip member. That is an approved land acknowledgement image that is allowed to be reproduced and utilized. If there are other images that people are using, we can certainly double check on that. But that one is an allowable land recognition, and there's actually several of them by that foundation that we are able to use. We choose to use the one that is our local Coast Salish tribe, the Tulalip.
Have we communicated that to all our schools? So if they chose to do a land acknowledgement before, an event or something, that they would know to use that one that is approved versus just a different image?
We've provided that land acknowledgement for the image to all of our schools, and in fact, actually, if you walk into all of our schools, you will see that on the wall. So schools know that that is the symbol, the land acknowledgement symbol that we would encourage them to utilize. There are other ones available. That is the only one that we've seen, but that is the one we've communicated to our schools.
Yeah, we use the same one, and then we could also send out a reminder from the Everett Inclusion Office.
To send out a reminder.
Any further questions? Director Berg?
Well, I was just going to clarify, just the intent of the law was just to cover mascots, logos, and team names. And so I think the intention is super good. So I think we should be double checking and using a lens of cultural sensitivity, but just to clarify, the actual law just covers the mascots, logos, and team names. And as far as like school. So anyway, just so that's something that we're doing extra, but the state law isn't telling us to do it.
Thank you for that clarification. That's good to know. Okay, hearing no further comments, seeing none other, we will go ahead and move this to second reading. And say thank you. I was like, did we get through them all? We did. Okay. Next item of business on our agenda is upcoming agenda items. Dr. Salzman, may you please provide an overview of our regular meeting on December 14th?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Board Directors, and to the public. At the December 14th regular meeting, the board agenda will contain the following: second readings for several policies. Policy 3221, student publications, first reading, board recognition, oath of office, board reorganization, fiscal outlook, September and October financial reports as of now.
Thank you. And we have item 16.0, which is executive or closed session, and we had our executive session prior to tonight's regular meeting, so we do not have another one, which takes us to item 17.0. We all know what that is. Thank you very much for being here tonight. This meeting is adjourned.